Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph and completing Siman Reish Samach Gimel. So we have a bit to do. Without further ado, let's get started. Our learning today should be a schos for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitzieh Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagalo of Isban Kariv V'Daimar Amen. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today near the bottom of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, Siman Reish Samach Gimel, in the middle of Sif Yod Daled, 2 lines off the bottom on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis in the Shulchan Aruch, by the word Ule'inyan Asiyas Malacha. So let's remind ourselves of what the mekabel has been discussing here in Sif Yod Daled. We go back to the day when people didn't have a cell phone with the time, and an Apple Watch with the time, and a microwave with the time, and a washing machine with the time, etc., etc., etc. A lot of people didn't even have clocks. They didn't have a watch. They didn't have a clock. How did they tell the time? They went outside. They looked at the sky. They looked at the position of the sun. So time was not this down to the second science that we have now, where everybody is aware of the time down to the second. They weren't that way. So Friday afternoon, coming into Shabbos, very concernedly, they were looking outside to get a sense, when does Ben Hashmashos begin? When is Shabbos coming? When is Shabbos going to begin? So we had a story over here where the tzibbur made a mistake. They looked outside. Maybe it was here in New York, we're very familiar with these sudden summer downpours that happen sometimes after a very hot, humid day, where suddenly 4 hours before Shkia, the sky turns so threatening it becomes black outside. That's what happened. It was Friday afternoon. They looked outside, and it's dark. It was a Yom HaMa'unan. It was a cloudy day. And they looked outside. It was very cloudy and very dark outside. And they goofed, like the mekabel says in the very beginning of Sif Yod Daled. In B'Yom HaMa'unan ta'u tzibbur. They made a mistake. V'chashvu shechash eicha. They thought it was already night. And what did they do? They went ahead. They thought Shabbos is about to begin any minute. They went ahead. They tzindlicht. They lit Shabbos Neris, and they davened Ma'ariv. So in the beginning of Sif Yod Daled, the mekabel discussed, what's the halacha of this Ma'ariv? Is this a Ma'ariv, a good Ma'ariv, or do they have to daven Ma'ariv over again? Now the Mishnah Berurah pointed out to us that this whole discussion is only germane if it's after Plag HaMincha. Because before Plag HaMincha, there's no tzad that Ma'ariv is going to be a good Ma'ariv. There's no tzad that Kabbalah Shabbos is going to be a good Kabbalah Shabbos. This whole discussion is only germane after Plag HaMincha. So it was after Plag, they went, they lit Nerish al Shabbos B'toyis. They went ahead and they davened Ma'ariv B'toyis. Now by davening Ma'ariv B'toyis, they did 2 things. A, they davened Ma'ariv. B, they were mekabel Shabbos. So in the last year, we spoke about the halacha of Ma'ariv. That's the way the mekabel started this discussion. He said, as far as Ma'ariv is concerned, if this happened to a tzibbur, so the tzibbur went ahead, they got together and they davened Ma'ariv b'toyos, we're not going to be matriach the tzibbur to daven Ma'ariv over again. Since they did daven Ma'ariv after Plag, so it is a zman when it could be a Ma'ariv. We have Shitas Rabbi Yehuda that after Plag HaMincha is Shoin Laila. So, okay, they daven Ma'ariv at a time that's a roi for Ma'ariv, and they're at Tzibur. We're not going to be matriach the Tzibur to daven over again. But, said the mekabel, if this happened to a Yochid, if a Yochid made this mistake, and this is a Yochid who's in the habit of always davening Ma'ariv in the proper zman, he always davens Ma'ariv either after Shkia or after Tzeis. He always davens Ma'ariv in the proper Zman. He never davens Ma'ariv before Plag HaMincha. After Plag before Shkia. That's not when he davens Ma'ariv. Now he went ahead and he davened Ma'ariv at the wrong time, even though, again, it's after Plag, so it is a time that's quasi-available for Ma'ariv, and the Biur Halacha discusses the fact that we're going to learn later that on Erev Shabbos, you always have a heter to daven Ma'ariv after Plag, even if you never do that during the week. But on Erev Shabbos, you can daven Ma'ariv after Plag. But having said that, since this is a person who always traditionally davens Ma'ariv, at least after Shkia, and now B'toyus, he davened after Plag before Shkia, says the mekabel, him, we're going to be matriach to daven over again. We're going to say that his Ma'ariv was not a Ma'ariv, and he has to daven over again. But now the question becomes, fine, So we had this discussion as far as Ma'ariv. But how about as far as Shabbos? When the tzibbur or the yachid went ahead and they lit Shabbos neiros early, they lit Shabbos neiros after plag, betoyus, they davened Ma'ariv, so they said Baruch Hu, maybe they said Mizmar Shir, maybe they said Boy V'Shalom, they did it after plag, but they did it betoyus. Is that an effective Kabbalah Shabbos? And now they're Asr B'asiyas Malacha or not? So let's take a look here at what the mekabel says. Ule'inyan asiyas malacha. So we've covered Shabbos. We've covered Ma'ariv. Now how about Kabbalah Shabbos? Says the mekabel, ule'inyan asiyas malacha, when it comes to the halacha of Kabbalah Shabbos and an Isser asiyas malacha, says the mekabel, bein tzibbur, bein yachid mutarim. Whether this happened to a tzibbur or this happened to a yachid, they are mutter ba'asiyas malacha. The Kabbalah Shabbos hoysa b'tos. In the first opinion here in the mekabel tells you that Kabbalah Shabbos b'tos is not a Kabbalah Shabbos. So you hear this? You answered Baruch Hu with the tzibbur, which we've learned many times already. That constitutes a Kabbalah Shabbos in the day of the mekabel. They daven Ma'ariv. They said Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. They said probably Mizmar Shir, but they did it all b'toyus. And they did it after plag. After plag is a zman that you could be mekabel Shabbos, but they did it b'toyus. Since they did it b'toyus, it does not constitute a Kabbalah Shabbos. They're mutter b'asiyas malacha. They don't have to daven Ma'ariv again. Since they did this b'tzibur, we're not matriach to tzibur to daven Ma'ariv again. So their Ma'ariv was a Ma'ariv, including Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. It was a Ma'ariv. But the Kabbalah Shabbos is not a Kabbalah Shabbos, according to this first opinion. Now there's a dissenting opinion, says the mekabel v'yesh oimrim, but there are those that say an interesting thing. They don't disagree with this mekabel completely, but they qualify it a little bit. V'yesh oimrim, there are those that say, she'oisam shehidliku neiros, the ones that went and lit the neiros. So if we make this what we would imagine would be a typical case, they looked outside the window, they thought it was already late, so they went ahead, the women went ahead and sinned Shabbos licht, the men went to shul, and they went and they davened Ma'ariv, then the sky cleared up, they realized it's a mistake. So for the men, we're going to say it's a Kabbalah Shabbos b'tos, and since it's a Kabbalah Shabbos b'tos, it's not a Kabbalah Shabbos, and they could come home and they could do malacha. But the women who'd sinned licht, their Kabbalah Shabbos is a Kabbalah Shabbos, and they're going to be Asr B'asiyas Malacha. So v'yesh oimrim she'oisam she'edliku neiros asurim b'asiyas malacha u'sha'ar anshei habayis mutarin. But the rest of the people in the household, they're going to be mutar b'asiyas malacha. What's behind this? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois cotton nun vav on the bottom line of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. Sha'oisam shehidliku. Those that lit Shabbos licht, they're Asr B'asiyas Malacha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Afim lo hispalalu. They're Asr B'asiyas Malacha even if they didn't daven Ma'ariv. Just by virtue of the fact that they lit the Shabbos neiros, even though they did it b'toyus, and we're saying that a Kabbalah Shabbos b'toyus is not a Kabbalah Shabbos, but if they lit Shabbos neiros, they're Asr B'asiyas Malacha. Ava b'loy adlaka, but without lighting Shabbos licht, so let's say the men who went to shul, avshe hispalalu tefillah Shabbos, even though they davened a Ma'ariv, and they davened a Ma'ariv of Shabbos, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, came in Shebetos Haisa, since it was by mistake, it was done b'toyus, lo yishma Kabbalah, that's not a Kabbalah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'tam hayesh oimrim, the rationale of the yesh oimrim, who is saying that the Kabbalah Shabbos b'toyus is not a Kabbalah Shabbos. The Ma'ariv b'tos is not a Kabbalah Shabbos, but the Hadlakas Neiros b'tos is a Kabbalah Shabbos. Why is that? The Tama Yesh Oimrim, the Sfira Lahu, is because they hold the Kabbalah Shehi Al Yedei Hadlaka, a Kabbalah Shabbos that was done through Hadlakas HaNeiros, Adifa. That's much more powerful. Why? The Ispe Maisa. Because you actually went there and did a Maisa of Hadlakas Neiros. That Maisa makes the Kabbalah Shabbos of Hadlakas Neiros much more powerful. So that the Kabbalah Shabbos of Hadlakas Neiros B'toyus, that is a Kabbalah Shabbos, and the ones who lit the licht, they're Asr B'asiyas Malacha. So now, we've seen this machlokes, but one thing we see, both the first opinion in the mekabel and the Yesh Oimrim in the mekabel, they both agree that Kabbalah Shabbos B'toyos without Adlokas Neris. So the men who went to Shul and David Ma'ariv, both of these opinions agree that Kabbalah Shabbos B'toyos is not a Kabbalah Shabbos, and therefore those people are mutter b'asiyas malacha. But says the Mishnah Berurah, "V'ayin ba'achronim sheviu b'shem kama migdalei haposkim," the svira lahu that they hold the Kabbalas tzibbur b'toyos, when the tzibbur is mekabel Shabbos b'toyos, afilu rak al yedei tefillah, even if only through davening ma'ariv early by mistake, shma Kabbalah. It is a Kabbalah Shabbos. Rak shebazeh, with one caveat. There's one kula. If the tzibbur got together and then mekabel Shabbos b'toyos with tefillah, then ein amiut nimshachen achar roiv. We learned the halacha earlier that if there's one tzibbur in the town, you live in a town, there's one shul, roiv ha-tzibbur, the majority of the tzibbur got together in shul, they davened, they were mekabel Shabbos, you stayed home, and they made early Shabbos, you want to make late Shabbos, you can't. As soon as the roiv ha-tzibbur is mekabel Shabbos, it's an automatic Kabbalah Shabbos on you. Says the Mishnah Berurah, not in this case. In this case, where the tzibbur was mekabel Shabbos early b'tos, the guy who stayed home is not nigra achar tzibbur. He doesn't fall into the same mistake as the tzibbur. He could still do malacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he's machriya, he rules. Ve'ein lahakel neged elu ha-poskim. You cannot be makel against all of these poskim who say that a Kabbalah Shabbos b'tos by the tzibbur is a Kabbalah Shabbos. But if it would be some kind of a shas atchak, so then you could rely on the first opinion of the mechaber that the Kabbalah Shabbos b'toyos is not a Kabbalah Shabbos. Okay, now we go further here, top line limud ches amud aleph, where the mechaber has one more thing to say on this. The Yeshayimrim, there's another Yeshayimrim, is the Sashita of the Shibali Aleket, Sha'oisoi ner shehudlak l'shem Shabbos. The ner, again, we're talking about this case where it was cloudy, they thought it was already time to be mekabel Shabbos, and somebody went and lit neris. The Yesh Omrim, Sha'oisai ner shehudlak l'shem Shabbos, the ner that was lit l'shem Shabbos, asar ligaboy, you're not allowed to touch it, ulahoisif by shemen, you're not allowed to add any oil to it, va'afilu im kava, and even if it goes out before Shabbos really begins, asar l'taltaloi, it remains muktzah, you're not allowed to be metaltalit. What's behind this? Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Nun Zayin, asar ligaboy, hainu afilu akar shaloi hidlik adayin v'loi kibel Shabbos. What this means is, even somebody else who did not light, so somebody else was not mekabel Shabbos, but a woman went and she lit the neris too early by mistake, that ner is also ligaboy. No one's allowed to touch it. Not even somebody who was not mekabel Shabbos. Kain Kosova or Zerua. The Kosova Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes the rationale for this. Hatam, he says the rationale behind this is as follows. First of all, the Azal Lishitase. The Arzarua is going Lishitasai. He's following his opinion, which is the Kabbalah's Tzibbur B'tar Shma Kabbalah. So the first thing you have to know about this Yesh Omrim, is that the Arzarua is one of the ones who holds that Kabbalah Shabbos B'tos is a Kabbalah Shabbos. So you have this lady, she thought that it was already time to make Shabbos. She went ahead and she lit the neris. So now she was mekabel Shabbos. Her husband went to shul and davened ma'ariv b'toyos. His Kabbalah Shabbos is also a Kabbalah Shabbos. It seems that that's what the Arzarua holds. So the bailim of these neris, the owners of these neris, they were mekabel Shabbos. V'im kain, if so, says the Arzarua, says the Magen Avram for the Arzarua, v'im kain, huktzah haner limitzvasai. This ner becomes muktzah limitzvah. What does that mean? So let's just remember what the underpinnings of muktzah is. The word muktzah means set aside. The word muktzah is the opposite of muchan, prepared, or mezuman. Why is something muktzah on Shabbos? The reason it's muktzah is because it is set aside from us. It's something that we don't see as having a Shabbos use. Therefore, it's set aside from Shabbos use. Sticks and stones on the ground in your backyard don't have a Shabbos use. So therefore they're muktzah, they're set aside. And therefore they're aser b'tiltel. Other things that do have a Shabbos use are muchan. They're prepared for Shabbos use, so they're not muktzah. Now, that's one type of muktzah. There's another type of muktzah, and that is huktzah limitzvasai. When you have something that was set aside for use for a mitzvah, it becomes huktzah limitzvasai. Classic case of that is noi sukkah, or the walls of the sukkah. They're huktzah limitzvasai. When you take noi sukkah decorations, and you hang them up in your sukkah, what you've done is you set them aside because you established that these are for the use of the mitzvah of sukkah, of noi sukkah. Therefore, the pashtus is you don't have any intent to use it for anything else. So if you take an apple, an apple is not a good example only because what's brought down in halacha is to use shivas haminim for the noi sukkah. So if you have a cluster of dates and you hung them up in your sukkah to be noi sukkah, now you decide, I want to eat a date. You can't. Why? Because it's muktzah. Not muktzah of Shabbos, muktzah of Yom Tov. Huktzah limitzvasai. It was set aside for the mitzvah. It's now no longer available for a usage of chayil, for a tashmish chayil. So you can't pick that date, make a bar priyates and eat it. Unless you made it tanai when you decorated the sukkah before sukkahs. But that's the classic case of huktzah limitzvasai. Says the Magen Avram, this yesh oimrim in the mechaber, that says that the ner that was lit by mistake is a muktzah, and it's also ligabo. You're not allowed to touch it. And even somebody who wasn't mekabel Shabbos yet, so for him it's not Shabbos, even he's not allowed to touch it. Why? Because the lady who lit it was mekabel Shabbos. Because Kabbalah Shabbos B'toyis, the Dirshu holds, is a Kabbalah Shabbos. Well, now it becomes a ner shel Shabbos. If it's a ner shel Shabbos, it's huktzah lemitzvasai. If it's huktzah lemitzvasai, it's not available for any other use. V'kevin shehuktzah labaylim, huktzah lakoil. Since muktzah goes after the owner of the object. Now the owner of this ner is the lady who lit the ner. And it's huktzah lemitzvasai to her, so it's muktzah to everybody else. Now, usually muktzah is not usher to touch. The isser of muktzah is an isser tiltal. You're not allowed to move or manipulate something that's muktzah, but you're allowed to simply touch muktzah. But over here, the mechaber said the ner is also ligaboy. Says the Chavetz Chaim. The gam also ligaboy, you're not even allowed to touch it. Why? The chayshinon shemi yishtamish boy. Because we're afraid if we allow you to touch it, you might come to use it. But l'tzarich mitzvah yesh lohakel. Kasav Pri Megadim and Pri Megadim writes, Mi shehidlik ner Shabbos ba'oid hayoim gadol. We learned earlier that technically you could light neris early and you could make a t'nai that I'm not being mekabel Shabbos yet. We've spoken about this at length previously. We said you're not supposed to light early and not be mekabel Shabbos because then it doesn't look like the neris were lit l'kavod Shabbos. But you could technically light early and make a t'nai. I'm not being mekabel Shabbos until later. Says the Pri Megadim, Mi shehidlik ner Shabbos ba'oid hayoim gadol. If somebody did this, they lit early, v'hisne shaloi l'kabel Shabbos with a t'nai not to be mekabel Shabbos, afilu hachi huktzah haner limitzvasa. Even though you weren't mekabel Shabbos yet, but you lit that ner for the tzorich of ner Shabbos, so it becomes muktzah limitzvasai v'asar lehistamish by tashmish chayil v'afilu acherim asurim the muktzah labaylim asar lakoil. Okay, moving along, second line down in the Shulchan Aruch Sif Tesvav, says the mechaber. Very interesting halacha that a lot of people are not familiar with. Mi sheshaha lehispalel mincha be'erev Shabbos. Somebody who came late to shul and he didn't have a mincha yet. Ad shekiblu hakohol Shabbos. So what happened is somebody came into shul and guess what? They already said B'ay v'shalom. They were mekabel Shabbos already, but it's still a zman that technically you could have a mincha. It's still before Shkia. So you could still have a mincha. And this guy didn't have a mincha yet. So he wants to go ahead and have a mincha. So the tzibbur in the room, the people in the shul, they were already mekabel Shabbos. You want to daven a mincha. What kind of mincha? A mincha shel chayil. You want to daven a weekday mincha because for you it's still Friday. For you it's still Erev Shabbos. Mi sheshal hispal mincha be'erev Shabbos at shekiblu hakol Shabbos. The tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos. Lo yispal mincha ba'oisei beis hakneses. You cannot daven mincha in that shul. Eliyele chutz la'oisei beis hakneses. You have to go out of the shul v'yispal tefillah shel chayil, and you have to daven the mincha out of the shul. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. There's an obvious question over here that some of you, I hope, already have in your minds, and we'll tackle that in the Biur Halacha. But let's take a look first here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Nun Ches. What happened over here? You came into shul after the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does that mean? Hainu ba'miras Baruch Hu. Maybe they said Baruch Hu already. We've seen that Baruch Hu of Friday night Ma'ariv constitutes Kabbalah Shabbos. That's the beginning of Tfilas Ma'ariv of Shabbos. So that constitutes Kabbalah Shabbos. Oy b'mizmar shir l'yom Shabbos. Or they already said Mizmar Shir. Hakol makom l'fi minhagay. Each place according to its minig. So by us, they already said Ba'i v'shalom. Why did my camera just freeze? Okay, my camera blinked out there for a minute, but now it seems to be working again. So I hope everything is in order. Okay. So I was saying, the Mishnah Berurah said over here, Ois Katan Nun Ches. What does it mean that the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos? Hainu ba'miras Baruch Hu. They said Baruch Hu. We've learned already many times that Baruch Hu is the beginning of Friday night Ma'ariv. It's the beginning of Shabbos Ma'ariv. That constitutes Kabbalah Shabbos. Oy b'mizmar shir l'yom Shabbos. Or they already said Mizmar Shir. Hakol makom l'fi minhagay. Each place according to its minig. So by us, maybe they said Ba'i v'shalom already. That constitutes Kabbalah Shabbos. Ukidela el b'siman reish samach aleph sif daled ayin sham. Ois Katan Nun Tes lo yispalil. This person who didn't daven mincha yet, it's still before Shkia. He can still daven mincha, right? According to the Rabbeinu Tam people, it's still the 58 and a half minutes after Shkia. So it's still before the beginning of Ben Hashmoshes. He could still daven mincha. But the tzibbur in this room was already mekabel Shabbos. So you can't daven a mincha shel choil in that room. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Nun Tes lo yispalil hainu afilu oid hayom gadol. Even if it's still the zman of mincha. O mishum, the reason for this is sha'acharei sha'akol kitchu hayom. Once the tzibbur in the room was already mekadesh Shabbos, lo yasenu choil etzlam. You can't go ahead and daven a mincha of the weekday. You can't daven a tefillah shel choil in the face of a tzibbur for whom it's Shabbos. By them, they were already mekabel Shabbos. You're standing there davening a tefillah shel choil? Can't do that. And therefore, you got to go out of the room to daven. Now, very fascinating, by the way. The Rishiv Zatzal, Rav Moshe Zecher Tzaddik Kodesh Livracha, held that this is a din in the room. It's not a din in the tzibbur. It's a din in the room. So according to the Rishiv Zatzal, if you have a shul where roiv of the tzibbur davens makes Shabbos early, so let's say it's during the summer, and this shul only has one minyan. They have an early Shabbos minyan. They don't have another minyan. So the whole shul got together and they made Shabbos early. Now you walk in and you're looking for a late Shabbos minyan and you find out there isn't one. So the first thing you have to do is you have to daven mincha. So you want to daven mincha. The room is empty. You're the only one in the room. You're not allowed to daven mincha shel choil in that room. Because in that room, the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos. For that room, it's Shabbos. Now many of you are shaking your heads. For the room, it's Shabbos? Says Rav Moshe, yes. In that room, it's already Shabbos. You can't daven a tefillah shel choil in that room. Go find out. Go to the lobby, maybe. I think he said that was okay. But you have to daven somewhere else. You can't daven in that room. Okay, so now, I said that there's a question that many of you might have. And I'll tell you what that question is. I was hoping somebody has the question, but nobody raised their hand to ask the question. And that is, again, what was the case over here? The case over here was somebody came into the shul. The tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos. He wasn't mekabel Shabbos yet, but the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos, and now it's still the zman of mincha, so he wants to daven mincha. Says the mekaber, he can't daven mincha in that room together with the tzibur, because for them it's already Shabbos. So what should he do? He should go out, said the mechaber, right? Yelech chutz lo'isai beis hakneses. He should go out of that shul, and what? V'yispal tefillah shel choil. And he should daven a weekday davening. Now wait a second. Didn't we learn that a yochid is nigrar after the tzibur? We learned that if the tzibur is mekabel Shabbos, so then a miut, certainly one yochid, even if he wasn't mekabel Shabbos yet, once the tzibur is mekabel Shabbos, it becomes Shabbos for him. So how could he daven a mincha shel choil? Why don't we say that since the tzibur was already mekabel Shabbos, he was already mekabel Shabbos, whether he likes it or not? And now he could no longer daven a mincha shel chayil. He should have to daven a double ma'ariv, a tashlumin. How can he daven a mincha shel chayil? Somebody should have had that question. Says the Bir Halacha Dibra Maskel Shel Chayil. V'loy kasha mi Sif Yud Beis. Don't ask a question on this from Sif Yud Beis. Don't ask the question that we just asked. The Yachid Nigrar Achar Haroiv. That you're going to ask, what do you mean? How can he daven a mincha shel chayil? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. The loy kasha mi Sif Yud Beis. The Yachid Nigrar Achar Haroiv rak le'inyan melacha. When we say that the Yachid is dragged after the tzibbur, and once the tzibbur was mekabel Shabbos, it's a Kabbalah Shabbos for the Yachid whether he likes it or not, that's only in the context of Isser Asiyas Malacha. He can't do Malacha once the tzibbur was mekabel Shabbos. Aval le'inyan tefillah. But when it comes to davening, kol shaloi ana imahim baruchu, as long as he didn't say baruchu with them, or I assume Mizmar Shir or B'ay V'Shalom, mispal tefillah shel chayil chutz lebeis hakneses. He could still daven a tefillah shel chayil. This would be one of those interesting trivia questions. When do you have that for somebody it's already Shabbos, but he's going to daven a mincha shel chayil, and that's this fellow. Since the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos, he's also about siyas malacha, but he didn't daven mincha, and it's still the zman of mincha. He's going to go out of the shul, and he's going to daven a mincha shel chayil. Interesting case. Okay, let's go weiter here in the mekabel. Says the mekabel 3 lines down, but v'hu, this idea that we're going to tell this fellow to go out of the shul and daven a mincha shel chayil, v'hu shaloi kibel Shabbos imayim. That's only true if he wasn't mekabel Shabbos with them already. Avalim ana, but if he answered to Baruch Hu, the kibel Shabbos imayim, and he was mekabel Shabbos with the tzibbur, ain't a yakol lehispal tefillas chayil. So let's say this fellow came into shul, and the shul is making early Shabbos, and he goes ahead and he answers Baruch. He did Kabbalah Shabbos. He said Mizmar Shir. He said B'ay V'Shalom. He answered Baruch Hu to Ma'ariv, and he says, Oivei, I never daven Ma'ariv. I'm sorry, Oivei, I never daven Mincha. He can't go now outside and daven a Mincha shel chayil. He was already mekabel Shabbos. He already was mekadesh the day. It's already Friday. It's already Shabbos for him. He can't go daven mincha anymore. A mincha shel chayil. Avalam ana v'kibel Shabbos imam and yakol ispal tefillas chayil. Eli ispal arvish shtayim. What he would have to do is he would have to daven a double ma'ariv. Both of them a Shabbos tefillah. He would have to daven arvish shel Shabbos twice. The first one is going to be for Ma'ariv. The first one you always do that tefillah, and the second one is going to be a tashlumin for mincha. So you're going to daven a Ma'ariv, a Shabbos Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei as a tashlumin for Friday afternoon mincha. El yispal arvis shtayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois cotton samach avalim ana. But if this fellow already answered Baruch Hu, Hainu Sha'ana Baruch Hu, he already answered Baruch Hu to Ma'ariv, V'aso ba'atzmoi kodesh ba'anias Baruch Hu, so he himself was mekadesh Shabbos already by saying Baruch Hu, Ve'ich yasen achakach chayil. How could he go now and daven a weekday Shemona Esrei? He can't do that. Umishum hachi les le takanta. Therefore, he has no other takana other than davening 2 Ma'arivs as a tashlumin. He's cutting samachal shtayim. He's going to daven 2 Ma'ariv Shemona Esreis. Hainu mitkila l'shem Shabbos. The first one is going to be the Ma'ariv for Shabbos, because the general rule is whenever you daven a tashlumin, somebody missed mincha and he's davening a double Ma'ariv, the first Shemona Esrei is the one that you have to daven now. That's going to be the Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei. The second one is the tashlumin. Now we're going to see over here, it's a little bit interesting. But let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Hainu mitchila l'shem Shabbos. The first Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei is going to be the Ma'ariv. V'achakach shniya l'tashlumim mincha. The second Shemona Esrei, which is also going to be a Shabbos Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei, that one he'll daven l'shem mincha. He'll daven that one for mincha for the tashlumin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but v'im hafach. But if he reversed it, if when he davened the first Shemona Esrei, he had in mind, this is my mincha Shemona Esrei. Maybe he's thinking, okay, we should do this chronologically. He's not aware of the halacha. So he's thinking chronologically. I didn't daven mincha yet, so my first Shemona Esrei will be my mincha Shemona Esrei. And he davens a Shabbos Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei, l'shem mincha. And then he davens another one, l'shem Ma'ariv. So he did it fakert. He did it the wrong way. He was mahapach the yotzros. V'em hafach, if he did it the wrong way, says the Mishnah Berurah, evshir the yotza. It could be that in this case, he's yoytze anyway. You know why? Hayol va'adayin yoimhu. Because let's think about this for a moment. It's really the Zman of Mincha. Let's say that what we're talking about over here, like we said, what happened over here is, I'm sorry, pardon me. What happened over here is that the tzibbur davened early. I'm sorry, bear with me for one moment. What happened over here is the tzibbur davened early. The tzibbur over here davened early. He missed mincha. He was mekabel Shabbos together with the tzibbur. Now he realized that he missed mincha. So he is going ahead now, and was saying since he was mekabel Shabbos already, the only choice that he has, he can't have a mincha shel choil anymore, so he has to do a tashlumin. He has to daven 2 ma'arivs. But the zman is still early. It's still before shkia. It's still the zman of mincha. Normally, when you have a case of a tashlumin, what happened? Somebody missed mincha. He forgot to daven mincha. Now it's already an hour after shkia. It's not the zman of mincha anymore. So now he's going to daven 2 ma'arivs. So the first Shemona Esrei that he davens is ma'ariv. The second one is a tashlumin for mincha. In that case, if he makes the first Shemona Esrei mincha, he's not yoytze. The reason he's not yoytze is because it's not the zman of mincha anymore. So the first Shemona Esrei that you have to daven is you have to daven the one of that zman. Now it's the zman of ma'ariv. So you have to daven ma'ariv. The second one, you can daven the tashlumin for mincha. But over here, this story is happening when it's still the zman of mincha. So since it's still the zman of mincha, it could be that b'di'eved, if he made the first Shabbos mincha, it would be efficacious and he would be yoytze. Now the Mishnah Berurah ends off over here and he says, Kain kosav a pri megadim b'simin zeh, v'ayin le'el b'pri megadim b'mishpat zav simin kov ches, siv cotton ches. What's that all about? I believe he's sending us to a Rabbi Kiva Eger that's mentioned over there, where the Rabbi Kiva Eger says it seems to suggest that it could be that this is what he should even do lechatchila. It could be that since it's the zman of mincha, really even lechatchila, the first Shemona Esrei should be mincha. Okay. Now we move along to Sif Tez Zayin. In Bala Beis HaKnesses Samach LaKabbalas HaTzibur Shabbos. Let's say somebody comes to shul, and again, this fellow was coming to shul Friday evening. He's coming late to shul, and he comes in late. He didn't daven mincha yet. In Bala Beis HaKnesses Samach LaKabbalas HaTzibur Shabbos. He walks in, and he hears them singing L'Chadaydi, and they're singing Yamanu Smile. Da-da, 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 da-da. They're singing Yamanu Smile, and he didn't daven mincha yet. Or they're singing Loisei Vaishi a little bit earlier. They're singing Loisei Vaishi, he didn't daven mincha yet. So he wants to chap a rein, and he wants to daven mincha. Now, if the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos, he can no longer daven a mincha of choil in that room. But they weren't mekabel Shabbos yet. They're holding by Loisei Vaishi. Before by V'Shalom. So they weren't mekabel Shabbos yet. He wants to chap a rein and get in his mincha shel choil before they're mekabel Shabbos. Should he go ahead and do that? Or what happens if he's in the middle of Shemona Esrei and they were already mekabel Shabbos? Or what happens if the tak is singing Yom Nismail and he says to himself, there's no way I have time to complete Shemona Esrei before they're mekabel Shabbos? Does he have to go out? Or could he daven, since they weren't mekabel Shabbos yet, maybe he could still daven the mincha shel choil in that room? Let's see what the mekabel says. In Bala Beis HaKnesses Samach LaKabbalas HaTzibur Shabbos, if he comes into the shul very close to when the tzibbur is going to be mekabel Shabbos, Says the mechaber, maschil hispal mincha. He could go ahead and he could start mincha shel chayil. Va'afal pisha ba'oidai mispalel yekablu at tzibbur Shabbos ein bekach klum. And even if the tzibbur is going to be mekabel Shabbos in the middle of his mincha shel chayil shmona esrei, that's fine. Hayil v'hiskel beheter. Since he started the shmona esrei shel chayil beheter before the tzibbur was mekabel Shabbos, it's okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Samach Beis. Maschil hispal mincha, he could start davening mincha. V'lo yamten at sheyana baruch hu. Don't wait until the tzibur says Bay v'shalom or mizmor shir or baruch hu tamayriv. Dim yaneh, because if he answers baruch hu, shuv lo yuchal hispal achkach mincha. He's not going to be able to daven mincha shel chayil anymore because he's mekabel Shabbos. So no. Jump up and daven your mincha shel chayil. Ois kan samet gimel hayil v'hiskel beheter. Since you started beheter, va'afal pisha hayu yodeya shelo yuchal ligmar afilu chatzi atfila kaidem baruchu. Even if this fellow knows that he's not going to make it even halfway through his weekday shmona esrei before the tzibbur is mekabel Shabbos, he should go ahead and start davening anyway. Mikamaka mikri hiskel beheter. That's called starting beheter, and that's okay. Why is this? This isser, that once the tzibur is mekabel Shabbos, you don't daven a mincha shel chayil in their face. It's not mi'ikar adin. It's a chumrah. It's a chumrah ba'alma. And therefore, in this case, you came in and you're running late and they weren't mekabel Shabbos yet, you could go ahead and start, even if you know you're not going to finish shmona esrei before the mekabel Shabbos, you could do it anyway. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, toiv yoiser ba'ofen zeh. It would be better in this case that you should go out of the shul and you should daven there. Moving on to the final sif of this siman, Reish Sameth Gimel Sif Yud Zayin. Says the mechaber, Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, this is a very pertinent halacha. This is halacha that a lot of people wonder about. Very interesting. Says the mechaber, Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, Shemi shekibel alav Shabbos kaidem shechashecha. Somebody who's mekabel Shabbos early. So again, I'm recording this shir during the summertime, so people make Shabbos early. Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say that if you made Shabbos early, so your Kabbalah Shabbos is a valid Kabbalah Shabbos, mutter loymar liyisrael chaveroi lasois loy malacha. So you made Shabbos early. Your neighbor didn't make Shabbos early. You come home and you see that there was malacha that still has to be done in your house. Somebody forgot to turn on the fire. Somebody forgot to turn on a light. Somebody forgot to turn on the air conditioning. Whatever it is, you need malacha. Guess what? You could go call your neighbor and ask your neighbor to please come in and do malacha for you. Mashma, even malacha daraisa. Very interesting. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Samach Daled. Mutter loymar. You're allowed to say to a fellow Yid, you're allowed to ask him to do malacha for you. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says something over here, but he says precious little. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what's the rationale for this? The kevan shel chaverei mutter, because since for your chaver, it's 100% mutter, for your chaver, it's not Shabbos yet. It's Friday afternoon. The kevan shel chaverei mutter, since for your chaver it's mutter, ein iser amira shaykh bazeh. There can't be an Isser of Amira. It's not Shabbos for him. There can't be an Isser of Amira. Now, we need to take a step back over here for a moment, because it's Mechusar Biur. Like, why is this? Let's go back to something that we learned way back when we were learning the very complicated sugya of Amira La'akum. It's Shabbos for you. It's Shabbos morning. You need malacha done. You're not allowed to go to an Eina Yehudi and ask an Eina Yehudi to do malacha for you. Why not? Is it Shabbos for him? No, he's an Eina Yehudi. Is it mutter for him to make a fire? Is it mutter for him to turn on the light? Is it mutter for him to turn on the air conditioner? 100% it's mutter. But you're not allowed to ask him to do it. Why? Because there's an Issa D'Rabbanan of Amira L'Akum. It's such a strong Issa D'Rabbanan, they were masmichit al hakra. They have an asmachta from the pasuk, because the pasuk says kol malacha lo yeyaseh. No malacha should be done. It doesn't say you shouldn't do malacha. It says no malacha should be done. From there, Chazal said, so even to have an Eina Yehudi do malacha for you, you can't do. So there's a very strong Issa D'Rabbanan of Amira L'Akum. Even though, again, for the Akum, it's not Shabbos. For the Akum, there's no Issa Malacha. So how about over here? Over here, you made Shabbos early. For you, it's bona fide Shabbos. But your chaver, the Yisrael, he wasn't mekabel Shabbos. So for him, it's mutter. Amira is mutter. Why is Amira mutter? Because what do you mean? It's not Shabbos for him. So the Mishnah Berurah says, Ein Isser Amira Shaykh Pazeh. There can't be an Isser of Amira. Why not? What's the difference between this and Amir al-Akum? Amir al-Akum is Asr, even though for the Akum it's completely mutter. Over here, Amir al-Yisrael, when you made early Shabbos and he didn't, is mutter. Why? Because for him it's mutter. What's the difference? So there are different explanations brought down. The simplest explanation that's brought down is that the Isser D'Rabbanan of Amir al-Akum was only made when it's Shabbos for Gans Klal Yisrael. They didn't make an Isser of Amir al-Akum when there are hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Yidden walking around for whom it's not Shabbos. When it's completely Shabbos for everybody, then it's shaykh to have an Isser of Amir al-Akum. Kol malacha lo yeyaseh. But when for 100,000 Yidden it's not even Shabbos yet, over there Chazal said it's not shaykh to make a gzeira of Amir al-Akum. So the Isser D'Rabbanan of Amir al-Akum, or Amira period, doesn't pass. And it doesn't apply when you make early Shabbos. And therefore even Amir al-Yisrael would be mutter. There are more complex explanations that have to do with Hilchos Shlichus, etc., etc. Somebody wants to be ma'ayin in it. There's a lot to see in this. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Ois Katan Samach Dalet. V'sif zeh ayri. You should know that this sif in Shulchan Aruch, sif Yud Zayin over here, is talking about a case, kisheyesh shas harbe ad ben hashmoshes. We're talking here about when a Yid was mekabel Shabbos very early. So like I said, during the summer, somebody davened mincha before plag, he was mekabel Shabbos after plag, and then he davened mariv. It's still a long time until ben hashmoshes. Dim was samach ben hashmoshes, because if it's already close to this man, if it's already close to Ben Hashmoshes, when automatically it's Shabbos, bevadai kiblu roiv anshe ir Shabbos. In that case, most of the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos, right? Before Ben Hashmoshes, a little bit before Ben Hashmoshes, everybody is mekabel Shabbos, and then v'hamiyot nigra acharei and bal karchoi. So then it becomes Shabbos for everybody, because everybody goes after the tzibbur. Ukadela el b'sif yud beis v'loy shaykh din zeh. So then you can't have this. So don't think that this means that if you are mekabel Shabbos 10 minutes before Ben Hashmoshes, but your chaver didn't say Boy V'Shalom yet, you could ask him to do malacha. No, you can't. If the tzibbur was already mekabel Shabbos, you can't, because now for everybody it's already Shabbos. Kishemagia samach leBen Hashmoshes, the Mishnah Berurah is reminding us, when it gets very close to Ben Hashmoshes, when Kabbalah Shabbos automatically kicks in, Al Yamtinu Loimar Mizmer Shil Yom HaShabbos. Don't hold up being mekabel Shabbos. Oishar Ma'amorim Hanoyagim Loimar B'Shvil Kabbalah Shabbos. Or let's say, Boy V'Shalom B'Shvil Eza Anoshim Ha'oiskim B'Beisam B'Inyoneim. Because you see that a couple of people didn't come to shul yet. Umashid Love L'Beis HaKnesses, and they're coming to shul late. Don't hold up Kabbalah Shabbos, because we're afraid that if you do that, you might postpone Kabbalah Shabbos until after the Zman, and people are going to end up doing malacha keneged halacha. I had a very interesting story many, many, many years ago when I was a bacher. I was a very handy bacher, and in yeshiva, in the Besmedrish, in yeshiva Staten Island, it was a boiling hot summer day. It was like 99 degrees and humid. And the Besmedrish had 3 big air conditioners, but you needed all 3 of them in order to cool the Besmedrish off. And one of them, the electric cord, it was a 40 amp, 220 volt cord, blew out. Sparks all over the place. A few minutes before they were going to be mekabel Shabbos, they had already started l'chadoidi, and my Rebbe, Rebbe Feinstein, Stark, came over to me. He said, "Run, could you fix it?" I said, "Yes, run, get your tools, and fix it. And we're going to hold up Kabbalah Shabbos." And I went, and I got my tools, and I came into Besmedrish, and I quickly cut the wire, and stripped it, and spliced it, and everything else, and got everything working again. And I finished a few minutes still before Ben Hashmoshes, obviously. I finished, but they were standing by the bima, the chassid was standing by the bima, turning around, looking at me, waiting for me to wave. And as soon as I finished, I just shoved all of my tools away, and I waved, and they went, Boy V'Shalom. Okay. Finally, we come to the final Ramah here in Siman Reish Samach Gimel. So we just had this halacha, somebody made Shabbos early. We said that if he made Shabbos early, even Amir al-Yisrael is mutter. Says the Ramah Hagah, And you're zicher mutter to have hana from that malacha that was done. Seems to be a little bit of a strange ramah. The explanation, why is it strange? Because the mekabel just said, Yesh Oimrim, that Amirali Yisrael, after you were mekabel Shabbos early, is mutter. Says the Ramah, and you're allowed to have hana. Well, if you're allowed to do the Amira, if you're allowed to ask your friend, please turn on the light, obviously you're allowed to have hana from the malacha. It seems that what the Ramah is saying is, the mekabel said this in the name of a Yesh Oimrim. This is a Rashba. He's saying it in the name of the Yesh Oimrim. But there are those that disagree with this Rashba. Seems that the Ramah is saying you should know that even the ones that are machmir keneged the Ramah, and they hold that this Amira is Aser, but if the Yid went ahead and did do the Malacha, you're allowed to have Hana from that Malacha. Says the Ramah weiter, V'chosh kein b'moitzai Shabbos. This halacha, that Amirali Yisrael is mutter after you made early Shabbos, Kolshkein, it's true, on Motzei Shabbos. What does that mean, says the Ramah? If you daven at a very late Ma'ariv minyan on Motzei Shabbos, or you're a Rebbe, I don't know, and you had a very long Shalosh Shudas, and you're saying Shalosh Shudas Torah, and you're singing Mizmor David 16 times, so you have a very long, drawn-out affair for Shalosh Shudas, and it's very late. And everybody else davened Ma'ariv already. And they said, Atachan Antonu. And for them, it's not Shabbos. Mutter loymel chavera Yisrael shekvar hispal v'hivdil. You could ask a Yid who already davened Ma'ariv and did Havdalah in Shemona Esrei. He said, Atachan Antonu. You could ask him, you could tell him, Lasai sloi malachtai, to do malacha for you, lahadlik daineros, turn on the light, or light candles, or lavashaloi, cook us something good for Shalosh Shudas. And you could have hana, and you could eat from his malacha. Kain nera li. The Ramah says, so it seems to me. So he says it's a kolshkein, kal v'chomer. If you're telling me that if you were mekabel Shabbos early, and your friend wasn't, you could do Amirali Yisrael, you could have him do malacha for you, and you could have hana, then zicher on Motzei Shabbos. For sure, on Motzei Shabbos. If they already made ois, and you didn't make ois, zicher, you could do Amirali Yisrael, and you could be nana. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Samachet. The Cholshkein b'Motzei Shabbos. Pirish, the explanation of this is, why is this a kal v'chomer? What's the Cholshkein? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. To ha be'erev Shabbos kfar kibel Shabbos. In the case of Erev Shabbos, once you were mekabel Shabbos, do you have an out? Could you say, oh, I changed my mind. I was mekabel Shabbos, but now I realized I left the lights off. There was a light that I want on, or there's a light on, I want it off. I changed my mind. I'm not being mekabel Shabbos. No. Once you were mekabel Shabbos, you're done. It's Shabbos. It's Motzei Shabbos. V'yev shalachzar v'afilu hachishari, and still Amirali Yisrael is mutter. Kolshkein b'motzei Shabbos, certainly on Motzei Shabbos. The kol shah v'shah im roitzah mispal l'mavdil. Motzei Shabbos after this man, if you decide you want scrambled eggs, you could go ahead, you can make ois, and you can make scrambled eggs. So you yourself could end Shabbos whenever you want. So zicha you can do Amirali Yisrael. Mikolshke the mutter loymar. Ois cut in Samach Vav. Hispalo v'hivdil. The Ramah says that you could ask another Yid that davened and made Havdalah. The Mishnah Berurah just clarifies what that means. He made Havdalah. Hainu shehivdil b'tfila. It means he said Atachan Antanu in Shemona Esrei. The bazeh mutter laseis malacha. Once you say Atachan Antanu, you mutter in malacha. Ukit l'kamam b'simin reich tzadik tes. Av shalei hivdil ala kais. Even though you didn't make Havdalah ala kais yet. Ice cut and samach zayin, umutter lahanais, and you're allowed to be nena from the malacha of the Yisrael who already made ice. Says the Chavetz Chaim v'halavush oiser, but the Lavush disagrees with this, and the Lavush says that this is aser. Eli im kein beirach v'hisiach taitei mishabes. The Lavush says a very interesting thing. He says you're sitting and you're eating Shalosh Shudas, and you want to ask a Yisrael to do malacha for you? No. Only if you're already benched. Because in benching, you're going to say Ritzei. If you're still a Milish Man Esrei, you're still going to say Ritzei. So it's a Mamish Shabbos for you. You're going to do Amirali Yisrael. He doesn't like it. So he says, no, you have to already benched, and you have to be Mesiach Das from Shabbos. Then Amira becomes mutter. But the Achroinim, they align with the Shulchan Aruch. How about if in the middle of Shalosh Shudas, you said Hamavdal Bekodesh L'Chayil Baruch Hamavdal L'Kulei Al Mashari K'Moshe Kasav B'Sei Simon Reis Savites Da'afilu Ba'atzmai Mutter Az Malacha Ach Tzarek Iyonim Yachal Achakach Leimer Ritzei Beberkas Hamazon Kevin Sha'aso Mitchila L'Chayil. So you were in the middle of Shalosh Shudas, and you decide you want scrambled eggs, and it's after this man. So you say Baruch Hamavdal Bekodesh L'Chayil. Once you say Baruch Hamavdal Bekodesh L'Chayil, you're Mutter B'Malacha if it's after this man. So now you could go make scrambled eggs. The question is, could you still bench with Ritzei? Once you said Baruch Hamavdal, you made it Chayil. How are you saying Ritzei? Customer pre-begadim on Motzei Shabbos any Yachid Nigrar Achar Roiv. On Motzei Shabbos a Yachid does not go after the Roiv. Aval Pisha Kulam Lo Yispalu V'Lo Yivdilu. So if the tzibbur decided that they're davening Ma'ariv at 90, so the tzibbur is keeping Shabbos going for a long time, you want to make ice. You're not dragged after the tzibbur. On Erev Shabbos, if they're Mekal Shabbos, you're dragged after the tzibbur. It becomes Shabbos for you. But on Motzei Shabbos, you're not nigrar after the tzibbur. Yachal hu lahavdo v'lasis v'lacha mishe yigeh azman. Once it's ice, you could make ice, and your mutter ba'asiyas malacha. That brings us to a close of this beautiful, beautiful Siman Reish Samach Gimel. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuas panas and sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Goel Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu amen. Be well.